All right. I have been told that we can get this show on the road. So thank you for joining us today for Jazz Lunch. I'm Smooth Steve, and with me today is Crazy Curtis. We're going to be playing some jazz cuts from the 50s, 60s, and 70s. We might even go all the way back to Louis Armstrong. What do you think? Wait, what webinar am I on? I'll move the fuzzy microphone now so it doesn't distract. All right. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for sharing some time with Curtis and I and the greater BFO today. We're thrilled to have you join us. And I'm thrilled for this topic, thinking about new audiences or finding audiences in existing platforms. There's great places and things you can do to identify and add to your audience characteristics. There's a lot that you can pick up along the way. I don't dare call it testing because there's real money to be made by further identifying and targeting your audience. With me today is none other than Curtis Gulash, Director of Paid Media and all-around paid media wizard, or Jedi, if you will. He knows his way around all of this stuff. So I'm going to learn today. I hope you're going to learn today. If you've got questions, drop them in the box, wherever the box may be. We'll be happy to answer them at the end. We should run about 40 minutes today, 45 with chatter. I know Kyle's going to get back on later and handle some Q&A. Curtis and I are happy to stay on a little bit longer if we need to, if there's a discussion going on, or if you've got extra questions, because that's kind of what we do. So that's what we're going to do. So this is our outline for today. It may look simple, but trust me, when we start diving in, you're going to appreciate where we're at. So I'm not going to bother with the boredom here. I just wanted to give you a snapshot of this. And this is about the time when I say, folks, are you ready to jump off with me? And you say, yeah. And I let Curtis speak.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Steve. My name is Curtis Gulash, as Steve said. I'm the Director of Paid Media at BFO. What does that mean? I'm going to stick with the phrase I've used a couple times, and Steve said he likes it. If you can attach a credit card to it, that's what my team does. So our outline here, we're going to talk about first-party data. We're going to talk about lookalike audiences, and then we're going to talk a little bit about custom audiences. We've got some considerations that you need to think about, ask yourself. We're going to give you some homework, and then we're going to have some Q&A. But before we do all of this, we're going to get into our contest. We're talking about lookalike audiences. So what you're going to do is you're going to name all the lookalikes and win. There are 7 of them. A couple quick clues here for each one. The clues are directly related to the number they appear in. We didn't scramble these in any way. So clue number 1, plus. Clue number 2, it's a quote. I'm not a businessman, I'm a businessman. Third one, not friends with Mark. 4, kicking, screaming, and drumming. 5th, resolute and unyielding. 6, not friends with Elvis. And then lastly, nuked food. So let's get into
food. That's the good stuff. So what we're going to give away, first place is going to get a $75 Starbucks gift card. Second place, well, what did we say? Give them $30 or 50? How about 50? 75 and 50. All right, first and second place. You might want to take a shot of this screen so you can win.
All right, let's jump in. So what's first-party data? First-party data is any data you collect directly from your audience. It can be email address, it could be mailing address, phone number, age, gender, household income, education level, parental status, interests and hobbies, job title. It's all stuff that you are taking from the first party. Where do you find it? It's in your CRM. It could be in HubSpot, it could be in Marketo. It is in Google Analytics. It's there, it's free. If you're not using Google Analytics, get off this webinar, install Google Analytics, seriously. And then lastly, it's in your ad platforms. They are collecting data that perhaps you don't know is there, and that's what we're going to start unpacking here.
Let me back up here and talk about first-party data. Next year sometime, cookies are supposed to go away. Consumers are owning their privacy again, and the engines and platforms are moving into a cookieless world. Google's flock has already failed. We're looking at plan B, and other people are looking at plan C. When we start talking about first-party data, it's in all of our best interest to build out your first-party data as best you can over, let's call it the next 18 months. I'm sure there'll be some window for the change, but think about over 18 months, adding to and complementing your first-party data. So if there's a field that you'd like to have, maybe you're missing something in what your first-party data looks like, or what you want your audience to look like. Think about that. Think about keeping a master sheet of everything that you'd like to know about your customers and prospects. and then go out and see if you can't add some of that data to your data set.
Yep. And as Steve said, collect all you can, figure out what you want to know. It's always better to go high level than down to the finite details. It's better if you can gradually get further down the funnel with more and more information, but don't start small, start as wide as you can. Age and gender, start there and then work your way down.
Work your way down. And then the other thing, Curtis started talking about Google Analytics in this regard. Think heavily about implementing a GA4 installation alongside your current Universal Analytics if you haven't, because you're going to get additional audience detail that's not available in Universal Analytics. Plus, you'll be able to play forward. So think about that data set living in Google Analytics for 9 months, 6 months, a year that you can leverage going forward versus plugging in GA4 next year when the cookie sky starts falling. If you do it now, you've got some data history and you've got some opportunity that maybe your competitors won't.
Yep. So this is just a quick screenshot pulled from Google Analytics. On the left side, you'll see audience. You can click in there and you can see the screen or the image is slightly below it to the right. These are called affinity and in-market audiences. They are all based on Google data and they are automatically pulled in based on the touch points and the actions that we have. The best part about this is, one, Google Analytics is free, and two, it tracks data across all sources. You don't even have to be running ads. If you have a site and it's installed, it's tracking for those people who aren't blocking cookies or things like that. It's great. You can look at your performance data across all sources. You can even get to the finite details and find out, a specific Facebook campaign is driving these users, or your email campaign has the highest bounce rate on your site. And because it's Google owned, you can actually use these audiences in Google Ads, which is what we're going to talk about on this next slide here. So one thing we always want to call out is that your campaigns must be live for the insights to pull into the UI. We've had clients in the past ask, hey, why aren't we seeing this layered in? Well, if we're not serving ads on a particular keyword, we're not going to see the audience data attributed to it. It is something you have to set up and get in place before you launch. You can't backfill that data, unfortunately. But with this, your ads can be built in Google Ads via traffic from other sources. So what we could do is, if we're doing a massive display blast, or even your email campaign is running, you can create an audience right there to fill in Google. So you could say, all right, well, this is the specific landing page we only use for Facebook. It's got X amount of users. Now we're going to target them in Google Ads. That is completely possible to do. The analytics audiences can also be imported in, which is great if you have an analytics team, because they're going to see data that perhaps you're not seeing right in front of you. So they can create audiences and you can just import them in versus having to build everything in Google. And then lastly, age, gender, household income, and location. These auto-populate. They're always going to be in there. You can always find your location, even if you're targeting the entire US, you can always drill down. It's there for you. So we've got a couple examples here on the screen. One thing we always want to call out with this is audiences can be applied and even excluded with bids being adjusted up and down. And if you don't have interest in affinities, say you're a B2B client, there are ways around this too. But I do want to say this, trust your data in Google Analytics. It doesn't matter if you're a B2B platform. Soccer moms, food and wine aficionados, they may be your core demographic. You're just not seeing that with your data, and you can use it in Google. Regarding household income, we get asked this a lot. We can't specifically say like we only want to target people who make over 150,000 a year. Google has it set up in ways to not exclude or give out too much personal information. So it's something like bottom 10%, middle 50%, so on and so forth. So you can target by percentages. Versus specifically, household income or even combined household income.
That's awesome, Curtis. And all of this data, we can extract this data from Google Ads and we can use it in other places and vice versa?
Yes, absolutely. So for B2B, first-party data on LinkedIn and LinkedIn ads. If you don't have the LinkedIn tag installed on your site, why aren't you doing it? And if you are using it, what are you doing with the data? This is completely free. LinkedIn does not charge you to use it. You don't even have to run LinkedIn ads. You would install the pixel. It starts collecting business demographic data based on who is coming to your site. You can create audiences like we have in here, you can look at views. The one on the left is just your site traffic. The one on your right is actually your LinkedIn ads traffic. So you can look at things like job title, company, industry. It's free to use. It's a wealth of information. And my favorite part about it is you can just look at it and find out not only who's coming to your site, but are the right people coming to your site. With any of this, as we're talking about this, and this is something that often gets overlooked for LinkedIn, when you're building your audiences in LinkedIn, we recommend two things. One, exclude your current company because we don't want to waste impressions and cost on them. And two, exclude your competitors. You know who your competitors are. It's great. They can pay for you to see their ads, but they shouldn't see yours. They're not going to engage and you're going to pay for the cost no matter what.
Curtis, when I'm thinking about audiences and running audiences, whether it's Google Ads or LinkedIn, at what point or how frequently should I map that back to what I thought my audience was when I started? Meaning I might have personas, or I might have a sheet that says, oh, these are my best customers, these are my best prospects, or whatever the case may be. I'm using that to build my audience. You said a moment ago that in Google Analytics, we may see an audience emerge that maybe doesn't align with what we thought our audience was. How often should I be checking that?
I'd say, it's a generic answer, but whenever there's statistical significance, for some people that's spending $5,000, some people it's 10,000 impressions. The big thing for me is I want to look at what's actually working, what's engaging. So if I see one campaign has a great click-through rate on it and it's outperforming others, I'm going to click the little box next to the campaign. In the upper right, I can click demographics and it shows it to me right there. And that's when you may find like great click-through rate, but unfortunately, we have government employees clicking on our ads and we're not contractually allowed to work with government employees, things like that.
Wonderful. Thanks, Curtis.
Next slide, if you don't mind. So first party data in Instagram and Facebook. Steve mentioned this. Audiences are drying up in Facebook. It started in 2015. Everyone remembers Cambridge Analytica. Then iOS 14 came out in 2020 and it allowed users to block data on their iOS devices from going into Facebook. You can pull things in Facebook like your age and gender of people coming to your site. You've got your followers here. The screenshot below that is actually pulled from an ads campaign, so we can see the same type of data with performance. But for Facebook, I'm going to beat this horse until it's dead. You have to use lookalike audiences. It's the most accurate representation of your brand that you can find because you give all the information for Facebook to build that audience off of it. And this is where we start talking about lookalike audiences. And this is also where the quiz starts, everyone.
There is one way around some of the first party data and Facebook stuff, and that is server side tagging. It's a very technical topic. If anybody who's listening or watching wants to discuss more about server side tagging and actually getting some of that Facebook data from iOS, please reach out. It's time consuming, but it can be done, and it works. It works well, and actually, I think that's what we're going to see a lot of in the future with regard to getting end-to-end reporting in the land where cookies don't exist. So think about that, or do some reading on server side tagging as well.
Thank you. All right, so looking at lookalike audiences. Lookalike audiences are audiences that are created by collecting your first party user data and then finding users who have similar behaviors. So if we look at Steve could easily, off of Steve alone, we could have a lookalike audience created that are Cubs fans, that are not Sox fans, that have 2 teenage sons, that are married, that work in Chicago, that work in advertising. All of these things that Steve is doing, he may not realize he's doing it, but he's creating a profile for himself. And from that profile, we can extrapolate new users. Now, we can find out information on them, the demographics, the things like that, after we have actively run those audiences, but we cannot pull out a profile that says, okay, here's our audience. It's white males. I'm not going to joke about Steve's age here, that live in Chicagoland. So when you're creating your lookalike audiences, don't just base it on site visits. Site visits is great, but it's got to be more qualified. So key pages and actions, products and services that you offer. For BFO, we could have a lookalike audience based off of our SEO page visitors versus our analytics page visitors. People who are having downloads, conversions, purchases, things like that. Video views are great. You can also look at things like, let's say you're higher ed. Put the lookalike pixel on the student portal where your active students are going versus anyone who comes to your site. We have clients who they have very specific actions that happen once users are signed in on their page. So we create lookalike audiences based off of those site actions. So the casual browser, the give me the free info is not in that same bucket as someone who is actively working with our clients. If we can jump to the next slide, we'll talk about this some more. So lookalikes in LinkedIn ads. LinkedIn allows us to create lookalike audiences based on site visits, page visitors, your customer list, literally upload your email list. Always go bigger than you think you need to, because match rates can be wildly different. Business demographics, so company, industry, things like that. You can have your third-party integrations. So if you're using HubSpot or anything like that, you can import those right into your LinkedIn ads account. You can do custom combinations, so a customer list who's been to specific pages on your site. Unlike Google Ads, Google will always create your lookalike audiences. You hit the minimum and all of a sudden the lookalike is created in Google. LinkedIn, you have to have 300 matches and you have to create them yourself. And it's really easy to do. Once the audience says it's available, you click a little box and it says create lookalike. It's that simple. You should be using your insight pixel, but also don't forget about your ad performance. Don't forget about your CRM data. You may find you launch a campaign broadly targeted and you see outliers that are doing incredibly well. Consider adding those in, create a lookalike off of that, engage with the page. This is their job title. Super easy to use. We do tend to see lots of great results for it. And this is incredibly useful for things like awareness campaigns, where you're not even promoting a specific product, it's your brand. You don't have a big following, so use it to promote your brand and they'll find people similar.
Cool, thanks, Curtis.
All right, so in LinkedIn ads, we're looking at audiences based on site visits, LinkedIn page visits, contact lists, and lookalikes. With all of these audiences, LinkedIn does a few things that make these super easy to use. One, every audience has a status. You know if it's building, you know if the pixel's fired, if the audience is ready to use, if it's being used and how many campaigns are using it, or if it hasn't been used in a while and it's archived. It's always a good reminder, ensure your audiences are ready to go. There's nothing worse than going to launch a campaign and you have to call your vice president of sales and say, hey, we didn't use that audience. It's not ready anymore. We got to rebuild it. Typically, it's 48 to 72 business hours, but still, if you know your deadline is, put a reminder on your calendar to make sure the audience is ready to go. At times, audiences will become too small and go dormant. That could be particular companies, they let people go, they shrink, there's less audiences there, or even at times, an audience just dries up. We've seen that happen on Facebook. It happens on LinkedIn too. If there's a specific group or interest you're trying to target, if the members leave, it dries up the audience. You can even do things like video views, your events, and if you're running lead forms, you can create audiences there as well.
And Curtis, when we're getting started by staring at our data, let's say we're looking at our CRM and some of the data we have, is it fair to say there's always more than one audience in there that I need to be able to suss out and separate those audiences so I understand I'm going a couple of different directions so that I can get closer to their true characteristics before I advertise?
Yes, great question. So it's super easy to use. Like I said, click the box next to the campaign, hit demographics. You can either view it there in a pretty little graph or you can export it to Excel. It will tell you industry, company size, job title, seniority, things like that. That's where we start to, it's not a perfect pivot table, but that's where we'll start layering in and say like, okay, this industry, this job title is doing well for this company size. Let's make this its own audience. There are lots of different ways to do it. There's no right way. We always recommend dial it in. If you can go one step closer or to your targeting, go for that versus going broad, unless it is something like awareness. The other thing you always want to consider with your LinkedIn audiences is, trying to think how to phrase this, like if it seems too good to be true, you don't want it, get it out of there, and stay on top of reviewing those audiences. I mentioned exclude your company and your competitors. You're also going to want to exclude retired unless you're specifically targeting those folks. Entry level and unpaid, always a good idea to exclude those. I know people say, well, we should target the influencers on LinkedIn as well. Right, but no offense, if they're entry level or unpaid, I don't know how much influence they're gonna have at the company. And then, um,
Those people are actually influencing using somebody else's profile typically.
right, right. And then lastly, seniority targeting on LinkedIn. Take it with a grain of salt. I'm blanking on the gentleman's name who I learned this from last year at Inbound. Seniority and experience in LinkedIn, it's not your VP, your CEO. It goes back to your earliest job that is posted on LinkedIn, and it bases your seniority off that. So if you're a first year marketing analyst, but you've been working at grocery stores and mom and pops since you were 14 years old, and those are counted on LinkedIn, it will use that as your total experience on LinkedIn. Use it with a grain of salt. All right, lookalike audiences in LinkedIn. Since LinkedIn uses multiple touch points, to find similar users, you're gonna end up targeting some irrelevant audiences. So dial those audiences in, like we've talked about, exclude company, job title, seniority. We've got an example here. We're using a matched e-com list for one of our clients. We found things like retired, unpaid, intern. We want to exclude those. We also saw a lot of traffic from yoga studios of all things. Apparently the seed audience has a lot of yoga interests. So we started excluding yoga studios and things like that. It's really easy to do. If you see one that's not working, literally just go in and type IBM. If IBM's showing up, you can exclude it. You will see multiple variants occasionally. So we have a client who works for shipping industry. So we'll target people like UPS, UPS Store, UPS International, things like that. It's super easy to do. Anyone can find it. Excluding these audiences not only saves us money, impressions and clicks, but also it limits the number of unqualified leads your sales team is getting. So they're going to be happier with you if you're doing this.
And if I understand this correctly, Curtis, it's that I might open this up wide, but then I want to prune the audiences that aren't performing, and I want to look at this actively as I'm working through it. And you said earlier, we might find a runaway outlier. We might think about moving that into its own audience just because it's performing so well. And so the rest of the audience either doesn't hold it back, or then this audience performs differently as a result. So we get to see new characteristics.
Exactly. All right, we can jump to the next slide.
Look at those handsome fellows. It could be Curtis and Steve. We're twins, aren't we? Not quite.
Lookalike audiences in Facebook and Instagram. These can be based on your customer list, site visitors, your product catalog. So if you're using something for shopping, it pulls right in. You can build audiences off that. Facebook pixel data, that one still, a lot of folks forget about it. It's relevant. It's a good source to use, especially if you're doing brand engagement and brand lift. Video views, app engagement, there's a lot more you can layer in there. They typically outperform your interest targets in Facebook. And thankfully, your lookalikes will never disappear overnight because it's all based on your data, and Facebook really makes it easy to scale up that audience. I say it won't disappear overnight. I always use the same example. We have a client, we're running retargeting campaigns. Literally one day, the retargeting audience had 4,000 people in it. The next day, it wasn't serving. Ads are on, ad sets are on, can't figure it out. Get to the audience portion and it says, this audience is no longer available. That was it. It disappeared. It could have been iOS 14. They could have been doing a data integrity purge. It's gone. It's not coming back. Kind of like the LinkedIn thing, make sure your audience is ready. For Facebook, if you've ran a campaign in the past and it worked well and you're planning on using it again, check the audience. We've even seen professional titles disappear in Facebook.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right, so this is just a quick little snapshot, a couple different views of how you can build your audiences in Facebook. So you've got your pixels, your data sets, your customer list, your page views. And then over on the right, this is how I said Facebook makes it really easy. So create your site visitor lookalike. And then at the bottom in that little box, you'll see it says 1%. That is where we recommend starting your Facebook audience. That is as tight as it can go. And with that, if we want to jump to the next slide, Steve, we can even see where we've dialed it in further. So it's the lookalike, it's based on that 1%, but then we're going to dial it in. So this client is based in the Southwest. So we're only targeting locations that are within their wheelhouse. We've also got age targets in there too, because their product has a specific age set that it most likely is used for. So we're dialing it in. So you can qualify it by age, gender. Sometimes, I always use this example, and we'll unpack that in just a second. Location, language, interest, and behavior. Gender sometimes. We have a client who I would say 90% of their clientele are female. They did not want us targeting any males. Okay, cool. None of our ads were targeted to males. None of them were targeted to males. We create a lookalike conversion, or a lookalike based off of a conversion action. In their case, it's booking an appointment. We run it. Everyone says, like, with your lookalikes, you know, if it's a conversion action, just let it do its thing. Ran for about 2 weeks. We pulled a report. Men not only converted in a more efficient manner, the conversions were through the roof. We called our platform to verify it. They said, yep, it's accurate. Send it to the client. Hey, we based this off of the conversion action. We were just doing lookalikes. We didn't dial in gender or anything, and men are converting more. That actually resulted in us having a dedicated males budget because it was outperforming females, because they're a great company for what they do, but what they do, not a lot of their competitors do for men. So it was an easy win for us. Simply put, machines and algorithms are smarter than you and I. They're not biased. They just run where the conversion is. Little tip here. When you're testing a same campaign, or when you're testing a campaign, run it twice, use lookalike, gender, and age, and then use lookalike and interest. Sometimes they will outperform each other. Sometimes you will find out that if, you know, we're not doing things like gender and age, we'll have great results, even though, you know, in our brain, we're going, no, this is the ideal client.
All right, folks, we're about halfway through the hour. We're about 2/3 of the way through the deck. We've got about 10 slides left. A couple of them at the end are fluff, you know, the Q&A kind of stuff, and a thank you and an invitation to our next webinar, of course. So how are we doing so far? Everybody doing okay? Feel free to drop questions in the Q&A if you have them. We're going to switch gears just a little bit now. We're still talking about lookalikes, but we're moving into similar audiences. So everybody with us so far, how's the material? We doing okay? I know there's a lot to cover here and a lot to digest. So I hope you're following along. If you have questions after the webinar, feel free to reach out to me. Poke me on LinkedIn if you want. I'm happy to connect you with Curtis, or you can reach out to Curtis directly on LinkedIn and ask a question. I think we might have an email address in here later too, that you can get to us as well. So any way you want, just reach out and grab us, and we'll be happy to help out.
All right, so as Steve said, we're going to talk a little bit about similar audiences. Here's my spiel on similar audiences. Google has to be different. We know that. Other people do remarketing, Google does retargeting, and vice versa. Similar audience is just what Google calls their lookalike audience. So these are automatically built. Like I mentioned earlier, if you create the audience, once it hits the threshold, Google creates your similar audience for it. Site visitors, app users, YouTube users, customer list, custom combination. So they've been to a page within the last 30 days and they're a current customer. These are created from remarketing lists that you create. So you do have to do some work on your own. Create the remarketing list. It's got to match at least 1,000 cookies with enough similar behavior. So for Google, it's not enough that we have 1,000 in the hopper. They have to have the same behavior. Affinities, interest, in-market, all of those things have to be meshing. You're not just going to target, you know, Kohl's shoppers high level if you're specifically trying to sell a Vera Bradley dress. My wife would be proud that I remembered that. With this, the only cost to building a remarketing audience is time. Take a half an hour, create a few audiences based on your site, do them early before you need them, and they can take time to build and be ready to use. So if you have a site conversion event, if it's a thank you page, start there. Do your all website traffic. If you have specific offerings, it doesn't matter if it's sneakers, if it's home goods, if it's software as a service, if you do consulting, build the audiences out based on those pages, see what works out. We'll actually unpack this one a little bit on the next slide here. So we have some lookalikes based on site visitors as well as email lists. So on the right side of the page, you'll see that Google is showing which campaigns your audiences can run for search, YouTube, display, and Gmail. You'll also notice that Google is calling out what audiences are too small to use on these channels. So you may find an audience will work with YouTube or display, but it won't work for search. This is not super new, but clients still ask us about how do we run audiences for search. There are one of two ways. We can simply layer in the audiences. They work alongside our search campaign. We set them in observation mode. And what Google is going to do is it's going to let anyone search for those terms. It will call out how those audiences are interacting, and we can bid up or down. The other way you can do it are what's called remarketing lists for search ads. So you create your audience, and it's been to my site before. Let's go as simple as that. And then you apply it to an audience, or sorry, apply it to a campaign with target instead of observe. Now, what we're doing is we're saying, all right, Google, if they're in this audience and they've searched these terms, now show my ads. So if you are a client who has a very long sales process, this is going to be your best bet for doing it, because you can bid up as someone gets through the sales funnel. A real example I like to use, if you are a multi-location hotel chain, start with they've been to the site, then the city, then the specific hotel, then select a room. As they get further down, you can bid up more and more on these audiences. We're going to show how we can actually do some simple bid ups and downs on the next slide here. So with this one, we have 2 email lists built out for this client. What we're going to do is we're going to adjust the bids for this. And why? We want to make sure that we're targeting multiple audiences as efficiently as possible. We don't need to have 6 dozen campaigns. We can layer these audiences into a singular campaign. So we want to bid up or down based on performance. Conversions aren't all that matter. We always want to call that out. If something's more efficient, it could be great for driving site traffic in order to fill our retargeting buckets. So for this audience, it wasn't spending as much. The cost per click is higher, but the click-through rate is outperforming the other audience. So what we can do is adjust our bid to increase the odds of our ads showing for that audience more often. So we're telling Google, if someone is in this audience, we're willing to pay more for them to click on our ad. And it's really simple. You can, go up to, I think it's 200%. I'm probably wrong there. You can bid up to 200%, and you can even reduce your bid down. I believe the max is negative 99%, which is, you're not going to serve on that. All right.
What that is, that's a good way to manage these segments within a campaign so that you can test things and find out what copy might be working or what secondary offer might be working.
Yes, exactly. All right, custom audiences. This one is unique to Google Ads. You can still stack audiences in LinkedIn and Facebook, but with Google, there's a specific section called custom audiences. So we can reach our ideal audience by entering relevant keywords, URLs, and apps. URLs can include your URL as well as competitors, because it's all based on behavior. So if I'm, the Chicago Cubs and I feel like I can target ChicagoWhiteSox.com, it's not going to be 100% one-to-one, but Google's algorithm will learn things about it. There's a little arrow here. You can dial in your custom audiences by interest, purchase intention, and app usage. App usage is really great because if your competitor has an app and you don't, you can build an audience targeting keywords and folks who have been to this app. Last part of this little tip, don't be afraid to get creative. I apologize if you've heard this example before. I've used it on another webinar. We had a client one day say to us, we want to target marijuana growers. It's not possible. And I don't know a lot of marijuana growers, but I don't know any marijuana growers that would want to be on a list. So how do you target them? We sat down. First, we made sure they weren't joking with us. We sat down, we had to stretch our thinking. So what sites do your customers go to? What are their hobbies? Use what you know about them to target. I'm not going to lie, we stereotyped. We built out things like hightimes.com. We found whatever keyword we could use that wasn't marijuana, I think we got away with hemp, couldn't do hash, couldn't do cannabis. We could do hydroponic growing, NORML, the National Organization to Reform Marijuana Law.com, threw all that in there. We got an audience that stuck. Google gave us a little side, told us what would work. We launched it. It outperformed all the other audiences. Worked well for the client. They got great qualified leads from it. So stretch your thinking, know what you know and use what you know. If there's something that's not there that you don't have, don't fixate on it. Go back to what you do know about your clients and what you're trying to do and build out your audiences that way.
All right. Anybody need us to go back to the slide that talks about the quiz for today? Everybody take a screenshot of that.
All right, some considerations. You know your customer and your goal. Use that to dictate how you build that initial audience for the lookalike audience. Are you thinking about today or tomorrow? If you have a big push coming out for Black Friday, get the audience going now. If you know it's going to be Nike, get the Nike page set up. There's no reason you can't set it up. It takes 5 seconds. Do it, check on it, you'll be good to go. Can you cast a wider net and dial in? We've had to do this as an agency. We get certain lists from our webinars and things like that, and we develop a profile. We launch it based on an email address. It doesn't work. There's not enough audience. So what can you do? Well, if you can't target those specific people, what you can do is take all of their email domains, pop them into LinkedIn, let it match, and then, okay, we want to target decision makers, CEOs, VPs. So it's literally the same mix. It's just we went from only targeting Susie Smith at abc.com to now we're targeting abc.com vice president, who happens to be Susie Smith. Do your platform and CRM data align? This is huge. Look in GA, look in Google Ads, look at all the data. Does it match your CRM? Are you seeing more engagement from VPs, but there are no VPs driving leads in your CRM? Okay, figure out where the disconnect is, match the data together. And then lastly, we're talking about audiences here. Does the ad copy match the audience? If you push ads out targeting VPs or targeting GA4 solutions, make sure it's getting to the right people. A lot of the times ads will be cast out. I'll see them and it's like, no, that really doesn't apply to me, but I know I'm in that targeted list for that ad. So make sure the ad and the copy are going to resonate with your intended audience.
Awesome. I'm going to jump back to slide number 4 right quick to give everybody a refresh on the quiz. Grab that if you can. Think about those pictures again. Now we're going to get into homework. These are the things that we want you to take away and to try in your campaigns. Shall we?
Yep, let's do it. Google Ads. Find 3 to 4 audiences in analytics that are driving efficient performance that don't match with your ideal customer profile. So if you see the food and wine audience interacting and engaging, but you're a software as a service account, build it out. It will not hurt. It doesn't cost anything. Put it in observation mode. Wait 30 plus days, see how it does, adjust your bids. Really easy to do. There is a plethora of audience data in there. Even if you don't know if it's in market or affinity, just start typing and it will show you audiences that match what you're trying to find. You're going to want to create retargeting lists based on your qualified pages on your site. Wait for the audiences to populate and create your lookalike. So qualified pages, they're not your homepage. That is not a qualified page. Anyone gets that. Steve gets the BFO homepage. That's not a qualified page. So your order confirmation page, your thank you page for a download, that's your conversion action. For a sign up, like your webinar, your client portal, I mentioned this before, we have a client, they work in shipping. There's a specific action that only existing signed in customers can get to. Put it right there, because that is going to be your truest representation of who is working with you. And then video views. We had a client many years ago who I think we promoted a 6-minute long video. You're darn right that we targeted based off of watch the whole video because they were invested at that point. That's a good sales lead for us. We'll do some homework for some other platforms here too.
So between these two, the first one is really, really easy. The results from that are easy to look at and easy to apply to your other campaigns. Creating the retargeting list might take a little more time, but you've got a lot of upside by doing it. So please, please, please consider doing the homework. Or if you're working with somebody, hand the homework over to them and say, hey, can you please do some of this for us? Take a look at our audiences.
Absolutely. For Facebook ads, we've mentioned they don't have a lot of the same audience data. It is slowly going away. So create 2 audiences, really simple: site visitors and off of your pixel, your site action or conversion. Really basic one. So anyone who's been to the site and then anyone who's converted. Create 2 campaigns using your best performing creative and your highest converting landing pages. We've seen that this is very crucial on Facebook. So if you have audiences that appeal to people who are green living or people who recycle, get them to that page. Make sure it's the best performing page. Don't give them the catch-all page. And then apply those lookalike audiences. Start with that 1% that we talked about. Dial in your audience based in your first party audience data. So that data might not be in Facebook. You might have to go to your CRM and say, okay, it's this age, it's this gender, it's this specific location. Layer those in. I mentioned it before, 90% of the time, the lookalike audience in Facebook is going to outperform your straight audience targeting using Facebook's audiences.
All right, now we've got 2 of the 3 for homework assignments. Who's ready for some LinkedIn homework? Everybody wants LinkedIn homework. All right, last homework assignment, folks. Shouldn't be too much for you to do across all 3. If you're not running one of the platforms, do it on the other 2.
If you don't have the pixel installed, do it. I don't care if you're not B2B, do it. If anything, LinkedIn is a great use of retargeting. They've been to my site before. Let's get them in another channel when they're browsing and doom scrolling.
Yeah.
Look through it.
Doing anything on LinkedIn, if you're not advertising, you're not very active, put the pixel out there. You're going to learn about your customers.
Yeah, you're going to learn about your customers. You're going to see how accurate your ideal client profile is because you're using one source, but LinkedIn is completely, what's the word I'm looking for here? Anonymous. They don't care that it's pixel data for them. If the pixel's already in place, create some retargeting audiences and then lookalikes based on your website audiences. So who's engaging, not just impressions, who's engaging, who's coming to the site, what industry, what job title. Excuse me. Layer in industry, job title, and seniority based on your existing CRM data so you can focus your ads where they're the most qualified. And then bonus points if your creative strategy aligns with this. We work with a lot of clients who will start off a broad audience, take the lookalike, they've been in these industries, we see who's engaging, and then we start talking to the client. We say, hey, we're getting a lot of government interaction here. We need to talk about our government solutions. We're going to target that specific audience with specific creative to them. So it's a great way of throwing a lot of spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks.
Absolutely. All right, everybody ready for some question at Q&A? We're done with the presentation mode. Done with Jazz Lunch almost. We're going to bring Kyle back. First, I want to jump to next month, what we're doing in case we're out of time. Red flags and Google tags next month, setting up Google Tag Manager for GA4. It's going to be a great walkthrough on how to do a lot of these things and how to think about this. So please join us next month, as I think Rachel's doing it, Kyle, is that correct?
That is correct. Yep.
She'll be jumping in and sharing wisdom. There'll be a lot of really, really tangible advice in that session as well.
Yep. And I'll
All
be
right.
sure to drop that in the replay. So after this webinar, I'll be sure to send an email to everyone that attended and registered so they can have the replay. And I'll be sure to include a link to sign up for next month's webinar.
Cool. And I'm going to hand the microphone to Kyle for questions. And I'm going to ask a first question if I can.
Please.
If I have 1,000 or more names in my CRM, 1,000, 5,000, 10,000, and I've never done anything to segment those, they might be customers, they might be prospects, they might be people that simply visited my website and downloaded a white paper. What should I do with those if I want to get to building audiences to be used across these platforms and learning about what my true audience is from that, call it my mess of 10,000 names?
Start segmenting by value. We had a client years ago, they did a great job segmenting. They gave all of their clients a star rating. 5-star meant they spent the most money. So we had the 5-star audience, build it, and then layer in those job titles, layer in the industry. Webinar attendees, signups are great, but if they've attended, I used this earlier, they're invested, they're interested. So pop those in there. A lot of us, because we're seeing a change and a shift in how marketers work and what we're willing to do. If you don't have gated content, if it's the free download, get it on that page, get a pixel there, feed that in. And if it's, they downloaded the white paper and they've talked to the sales team, or the sales team, every sales team has their qualified leads list, even if they didn't convert, toss that in, build it, see what's working, see what's not. There's no reason you shouldn't do that general audience all customers, all, website or webinar attendees, to segment it down. The other thing is just build them and you'll be surprised at different match rates. So you could see a 60% match rate for all customers, but then you do your 4-star customers, you might see a 70% match rate. So with those, we're not really talking retargeting, but those are also great for just keeping people informed, like, hey, here's this new bright, shiny thing that our company does. You should get it here for free.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Curtis. We have quite a few questions here. I'm going to start with the first one. Anonymous attendee asks, did you mention Instagram? How, if they do it all, do lookalike audiences work for Instagram?
Instagram, I apologize. I lumped it in with Facebook. It definitely works well. Instagram, your best engagement is going to either be people who clicked on your ad in Instagram, or people, if you have a video, they watch the video. We're seeing more and more buttons like shop now, they engage with that, cool, add that in. Anything that shows that they're actually engaged versus they just saw the ad is great, because I don't know how many ads I see on Instagram, but I'm sure I'm falling into a bucket somewhere, but the most relevant ads that I'm seeing are the ones I know I've engaged with similar content, whether it's guitars, marketing, things like that.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Curtis. Similar to that, we have somebody asking about Twitter. So, for businesses with active followings on Twitter, are there similar steps that can be taken to build lookalike audiences on Twitter?
Yes. Similar to Facebook, Twitter kind of did a data purge, but you can pull up lookalike audiences in Facebook. Great part about lookalikes in Twitter. The great part about it is you can see your core customers coming in. I looked at BFOs years ago and it said most people were from Chicago, go figure. But then also the biggest interest for BFO site visitors isn't marketing, it's dogs. Learn that one from Twitter. So with that, you can do lookalikes based on your page. So you just type in your @ and it's there. Plus, if there are other brands or other Twitter handles that you want to target similar audiences to theirs, you can just add those in. So you could target Nike, Elon Musk, Jack Dorsey, whoever you want, and it will build a lookalike audience based on that data as well, which is a really cool feature, similar to the custom audiences in Google.
Awesome. Personal question from my side. Is that why you chose dogs for this slide, Curtis?
No, I needed to get rid of the cat slide because I couldn't think of a good quiz question for cats.
Fair enough. We got a couple more questions here. This is actually a great one. Maybe we could have started with this one too. So for businesses that haven't done any paid yet, what are first steps?
Install Google Analytics, look at all your sources, see what's working, see what's engaged. If you don't have a ton of budget, if you're interested in just driving site traffic, getting some of that awareness out there, Google Display Network is super easy to do. Google Discovery is another cool feature. It's kind of Google's version of native ads. Take your Google Analytics data, see the audiences, see the affinities, pop it into a Google Ads campaign. I sound like I've totally drank the Google Kool-Aid here, which I have. They make it super easy. You don't need thousands of different images anymore. 2 images, 1 logo, you can run ads on Google. That's the display. That's not necessarily search. Super easy to do. You can apply those audiences right off of your Google Analytics data. So import it in, create your lookalikes. You can target people who are similar audience who's been to your site with never having run ads before. Super easy to do.
Awesome. So you got to start somewhere, and you're saying Google Analytics is kind of the source of truth as a starting place to build.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Here's one. I don't know if we can dive into all this, but how do I install the LinkedIn Insight tag on my website?
You Google install LinkedIn website tag, and it tells you how to do it. It's really easy to do. You'll have to find a unique code that they will provide to you. And then through the process, there's simple instructions. Am I hard coding this? Am I using a tag manager? Yes, I am using a tag manager. And then it expands, GTM, things like that. I think there's even an option of like, are you sending this to a developer? You click yes, it populates an email for you. It's super easy to do. Typically, if you're a dev person, you should see it firing right away. Statistical significance data 48 to 72 hours after it's been installed.
Awesome. I'm glad you brought up the web dev component too, because I was going to follow up with that as well. We touched on this a little bit, but just a little more conversation around, is third-party data going away? And like, is that a thing of the past? How truthful is that?
Third-party data is going away. First-party data is always going to be your cleanest data for not only who you're interacting with, who your customers are, as well as creating lookalikes. Third-party data, I always compare it to a bat, to sonar. Whenever we build out a third-party audience, we're not actually building the audience. We go into a platform, we click around the little boxes, and we say we want to target this Blue Kai audience or this Experian audience, and then we layer it in. And it might say this audience has 25,000 users. We hit go, and that's where the sonar happens. It pings back and forth, and it's trying to find out how many users are still in that audience. We've ran audiences for clients before where, it was 20,000 to begin with. This year it's down to 10 because a lot of people are falling out of those audiences. They can fall out for a couple different reasons. It could be privacy. They could just not have any touch points that they're doing that anymore. If it's something like Experian audiences, it could have to do with financials. So they're no longer in market to buy a sedan anymore, or they're no longer a new home buyer. The financial side of things, there's a set of audiences called a P cycle. It's P $cycle. You can look those up because a lot of finance firms cannot target based on household income. So they'll have audiences like empty nesters with a sizable 401k, or small business owners over this size. So you can actually layer those in too. But again, if the market's crashing, if there are any shifts in behaviors, those audiences can get smaller. They'll always be there because we'll always opt into things or not know that we told Experian they could use our data to target people, but they are progressively getting smaller.
I'm gonna add on to that too, just a little bit of a twist. There's still going to be people selling second and third party data. You're not going to get it by the nature of running your campaigns and matching one of your first party data points to some third party data you collect on the backside via cookie. That's going to go away. What will happen is there will be people selling data. The hard part is connecting that to your audience. So what we're thinking will happen in some ways is that they'll sell data based on affinity or some of those audience characteristics that we like. Is it a demographic? Is it an interest? Is it a geo? We'll probably see more of that. You can do that today. And you can also start plugging in your own stuff. So when we talk about server-side tagging, you'll start collecting more of that information to bring it into your first-party data. So you might consider that too, if that full look at the data is really, really important to you. But know that the line in between is going to be going away at some point in the future.
Yeah, that's a great distinction, Steve. Thank you for that. Trying to see
who won the quiz.
Well, we can get, oh yeah, that's right. We got 4 minutes left. I have one final question. I think I know the answer, but we've touched on GA4 a few times. Steve, you were preaching the gospel of getting in there early as UA starts to sunset. So quick question here. How do I ensure my GA4 is set up properly to identify different audiences visiting my site?
You call Rachel at Be Found Online and she will set you up with our team.
Curtis beat me to the plug.
That sounds great. And yes, whoever anonymous attendee, quiz answers can go as questions in the Q&A. I think we've reached that point.
I want to throw out one thing. Kyle, you and I talked about this. So first party data, second party data, third party data. First party, it's your data. You collected it on your own. Second party data, not saying we would do this. BFO collects data on our clients. Our friends are opening their own marketing agency. We sell them the data. That's second party data. Google does not allow you to do that. There's a box that you have to check that says, I collected this data. I didn't pay for this data. If they find out, they will shut your account down. And then third party data is when we jump into a Centro, a Stack Adapt, even LinkedIn, and we're going after audiences that are things like company data or company size. That's not our data. They are the data aggregator, and it's fed into their system.
Awesome. That's a great distinction. And Curtis, I'll make sure to add that. So after the webinar, when we send the replay, we're going to send a supplemental PDF with some of the tips and tricks that you saw here from Curtis, and I'll make sure that we include those definitions of first, second, and third-party data as well.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, of course. All right, I think we're at the quiz section. Curtis, I know you took the time to put all of those photos together. Do you want to MC this final portion here, or Steve?
Sure. Let me go back to the clues. All right. I'm also going to explain my logic on these.
And
Number
also,
one.
before you
plus.
jump in, Curtis, let's give everyone 10 seconds, 15 seconds to make sure they have time to get their answers in, because it looks like we may already have a winner if nobody else jumps in. This is where we need that Jeopardy music to come back in.
Melissa gets brownie points for talking about, oh wait, let's see, there's lots of stuff going on. People talking about the Winklevoss brothers suing Facebook.
Okay, go ahead, Curtis.
Right. Number one, plus. Number one is Ed Sheeran, plus is the name of his first album. Number two, I'm not a businessman, I'm a businessman. That's Jay-Z. Got much love for Hove. Not friends with Mark, those are the Winklevi twins. Kicking and screaming and drumming. That is going to be Will Ferrell sitting next to Chad Smith from the Red Hot Chili Peppers, the drummer for the Red Hot Chili Peppers. If you haven't seen this episode, you need to Google it because they have a drum off. It's pretty awesome. Resolute and Unyielding. That is going to be Natalie Portman and Keira Knightley as Padme and Queen Amidala. Resolute and Unyielding is what Queen Amidala said about herself in, I think, episode 2. Not friends with Elvis. Hound dogs. You ain't nothing but a hound dog crying all the time. Never caught a rabbit. You ain't no friend of mine. My hound dog is upstairs. He is not my friend either. Steve will tell you that. And lastly, nuked food. Possibly the only line I remember from the Arnold Schwarzenegger and Danny DeVito movie Twins. Thank you for coming to our webinar.
P.S. We never got to the Arnold Schwarzenegger one, so we're not going to worry about that one on your list. We didn't make it to the thank you slide, but hope you get the reference.
Yep. And so we do have Melissa, you get the brownie points. I do see anonymous attendee answered as well. And I'm going to say that that's our winner. So if I see you're anonymous, oh, that was Melissa as well. Melissa double entered. Well, Melissa, you get double brownie points for that one. All right. Well, if that's the case, and Melissa is our brownie point winner, I think we can conclude today's webinar.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We hope you got a lot out of it. We love putting our time into it so that we can share with the community. Thanks for joining us.